Hi all, welcome back to our next part of discussion on the exempted services. In our previous session, we have discussed till entry number 76 of exempted services. Now we'll continue our discussion from entry number 77. To start with on services provided by unincorporated body or not-for-profit organizations. uh, with reference towards this, all those services provided by unincorporated body or all those services provided by all those various trade unions, maybe the trade unions being associated with political party or trade unions may not be associated with political parties, whatever be it, all those labor welfare organizations, trade unions who provide services to its own members would be exempted from levy of GST. Similarly, all those services provided by residential complex or to put it in a very simple way, Residential Welfare Association, RWA. All those services provided by Residential Welfare Association to its own members of those residential units would be exempted from levy of GST. See, Residential Welfare Association may be AOP or a trust or a society. In different models it are being constituted, or sometimes they are not even incorporated properly. So that is why the entry comes out and says all those services provided by unincorporated body to its members up to 7,500 rupees per person of a residential house would be exempted from levy of GST. In case if they're going to collect any money in excess of 7,500, then that money would be leviable to GST. In simple terms, if they're going to collect, let's say 8,000 rupees, then the entire 8,000 would be leviable to GST. Up to 7,500, it is going to be exempted from payment of GST. Sir, if they collect 7,501, what would be the situation? Up to 7,500 exempted and 1 rupee is taxable? No. We have a circular very recently issued by the government which clarifies that the intention of the exemption is to exempt all those service providers who collect money up to 7,500. In case if they collect in excess of 7,500, then the entire money would be leviable to GST. So this brings us to a very particular situation. At no point in time, services provided by those residential welfare association or housing society to its own members who are all the partners in that residential complex, those money in it should not exceed 7,500. For a minute, think all those 150 plus apartments, 100 apartments. There will be a lot of common expenses: security, gas, water, electricity, and many common areas will be there. Lighting for a common area, maintenance of clubhouse, gym, spa, or sauna. Many services are provided in all those 100 plus residential complex. To maintain all this, they collect per house per month sum. So if there are 150 apartments, if of the 150 apartments, 120 apartments, individual persons, they collect less than 7,500, then it would be exempted. Balance 20 or 30 apartments where they collect more than 7,500 per member, then it would be leviable to GST only for those 30 apartments who collect in excess of it. So, however, for the purpose of threshold registration and all, the entire turnover will be included. I am sure you will appreciate that point relating to registration. But the most crux point here is up to 7,500 rupees exempted, and any supply of services which are already exempt that is supplied by the Residential Welfare Association or unincorporated body to its own members would be exempted from levy of GST. Followed by a new entry is introduced during July 2018, which is your entry number 77A, wherein which they come out and say any welfare organizations or association which are constituted for the purpose of industrial development or agricultural labor or farmer development or for the promotion of trade, commerce, manufacture, business, or profession. For those purposes, if they constitute an association and the membership fee of that association is going to be less than 1000 rupees per member for a year, then that money which is collected by those association would be exempted from levy of GST. Let's say we have a small residential welfare association called as Tamil Chamber of Commerce. This Tamil Chamber of Commerce, where they collect their annual membership fee, which purposes all those Tamil Nadu people will be form part of, manufacturers will be form part of this Tamil Chamber of Commerce. And in case if their membership fee is going to be less than 1000 rupees per year, then it would be exempted from levy of GST. So the idea here is all those associations who collect a membership fee less than 1000 and who are also main business or a main association purpose is to protect those industry or agriculture or trade, commerce, manufacture, business or profession, then it would be exempted from levy of GST. Entry 78 discuss about services provided by a classical artist or an artist who perform classical art form or folk performances. So any artist who specializes on classical art form or any artist who specializes on folk, then those artists for a music or dance or theater performances, per performances, the amount paid is not going to exceed 1,50,000 rupees. Then the money that is paid for a performance to that artist would be exempted from levy of GST. So, a classical singer, let's take up for our discussion, a particular classical singer, let's say Nitya Sri Mahadevan, one of the well-renowned classical singer. She makes a performance in a stage, and to her, a payment made during that or for that performance for a particular singing is going to be 1,25,000 rupees. Then, because the per performances rate is less than 1,50,000 rupees, it would be exempted from levy of GST. Similarly, the same artist, classical artist, go to the studio of a renowned musician and sing for a musician in the studios for a film, then at that time the money collected by the artist for singing a film song from the music director would be leviable to GST because it is not a performance or it is not covered under the exemption entry. Same artist goes to a reality show, sits as a judge on one among the jury of a reality show, then the money collected by the artist for being a jury would be taxable, will not get covered under this exemption. Similarly, the same artist can also be a brand ambassador for a particular brand. In all these circumstances, it would be leviable to GST. Only one specific exemption that they can enjoy is for making a performance, a live performance of music, drama, or theatrical performance before on a classical art form or a folk form would be exempted from levy of GST, provided for each performance they pay is up to rupees 1,50,000 would be exempted from levy of GST. Followed by entry 79 discuss about admission to museum and various other parks. So admission to various museum, national park, wildlife sanctuary, zoo, tiger reserve forest. Let us make a point here. All those places, be it museum or zoo or tiger reserve forest, a small fee is collected as an entry fee. Otherwise, you can call it as right to admission. Entry fee is collected at the time of admitting people, adults or children, into that museum or national park or wildlife sanctuary. Whatever money collected by the museum, national park, wildlife sanctuary, zoo, or tiger reserve forest at the time of entry, then those money are exempted from levy of GST. So very careful point that need to be noted down over here is these money received by those respective institutions are exempted. Point to be further noted: national park, wildlife sanctuary, tiger reserve forest, zoo. All these words are defined under Forest Act. We have an act called as Forest Act. Forest Acts define this term. However, the word museum is not defined. So it could be a private museum or a public museum. In case of a museum, for entry into museum, I'm talking of a private museum here, refers to a museum of Birla, a museum of Tatas, a museum of Mahindra company, or museum of Bajaj company, museum of TVS group. In case of all these museums, whatever money collected at the time of entry, then that money would be exempted from levy of GST. So our discussion over here is all these right to admission to these places. Similarly, any right of admission to all those archaeological sites or all those sites of ancient importance or ancient monuments, then all those places are also going to be exempted from levy of GST. In simple terms, it is going to be Humayun tomb, or it is going to be your Taj Mahal, which are all site of archaeological heritage. Then yes, it would be exempted from levy of GST. Getting into entry number 80, which discuss about all those services provided by way of training, coaching in recreational activities relating to arts or culture. All those training or coaching in recreational activities relating to any art, any culture. If it is going to be a recreational activity of any art or culture, any training or coaching is given, then the said activity is exempted from levy of GST. A point to be noted down over here is all those services provided by a supplier of service in connection with recreational activities. It could be drawing, it could be painting, it could be teaching the children of any other art, music, dance, of recreational activities is going to be exempted from levy of GST. Similarly, services of training or coaching on recreational activity relating to sports, when it comes to sports, it should be by a charitable institution registered under 12AA. So, if the service is going to be provided by a charitable institution which is registered under 12AA for recreational purposes, then exempted. In other words, X or Y cricket academy which teaches student, though for recreational purposes, they are not a charitable organization. Because they are not a charitable organization, whatever money collected by them would be leviable to GST. To the contrary, when it comes to your organizations like real sport-based charitable organization, the sports-based charitable organization teaches a student a particular recreational activity, like on summer camp they will have swimming teaching or various other teaching. If it is done by a charitable organization registered under 12AA, then it would be exempted from levy of GST. So these are your finer thin lining differences. Swimming coaching done by a commercial organization, even a summer camp for recreational purposes, taxable. Same summer camp coaching done by a Sports Authority of India, which is a charitable organization registered under 12AA, then exempted from levy of GST. Or it is going to be that area, that district, that city charitable organization, then it would be exempted from levy of GST. So these are your small differences that are associated with it. Moving forward, entry number 81, which talks about admission to various events. Same, a right to admission, as simple as that: entry fee, entry pass, ticket fee for a circus, drama, theatrical performance, or any pagan show, musical function, New Year Eve function, or a music release function, X, Y, Z, including your sporting event, IPL. when the value of ticket is less than rupees 500. Let me repeat, value of ticket less than rupees 500. Kindly amend your material. Amend material somehow missed. I mean that slide got missed to be amended. It contains 250. 250 has to be replaced by a word called as 500, where I want you to amend it. The amendment comes into effect somewhere from October 2000 and July 2018. The amendment comes somewhere during July 2018 onwards. 250 word was replaced by 500. A point need to be noted. A circus ticket is 120 rupees, 200 rupees, 350 rupees. Then that circus will be wholly exempted from GST. There is a entry ticket for the music function, 450 rupees, 850 rupees. Then all those 450 rupees tickets are exempted. 850 rupees ticket alone is taxable. It was a theatrical performance. There is a 200 rupee ticket, 500 rupee ticket, and 1000 rupee ticket here, where up to 500 rupees will get exempted. If it is more than 500, those 1000 rupee ticket of a theatrical performance would be leviable to GST. So this sums up about our entry number 81, followed by entry number 82, talks about again a right to admission for a World Cup under 17, which is already completed in 2017, old exemption. But 82A, a new entry came into effect only in October 2019, which is a World Cup that is going to come. Women's World Cup, under 17, Women's World Cup, India is going to host. For that, any entry ticket which has been there, all those entry ticket, whatever be the amount, will get exempted. See, kindly make a note of difference here. When you go back to entry number 81, you have a limit that up to 500 rupees will get exempted. However, if you come here, services by way of right to admission. If there is, for a Women's World Cup, there is going to be an entry ticket for 5,000 rupees or 3,000 rupees or 1,000 rupees, all will get exempted. See, these are the subtle differences between your entry. You can also think, already you told all recognized sporting event. Recognized sporting event means a sporting event conducted by a recognized sports authority. Recognized sports authority means the authority which regulate that sport in India. The authority which regulates that sport in India is your Federation of Football in India. Something like equivalent to your BCCI in India. So for that sport, you have that authority. So if that authority conducts an event, that it would be treated as a recognized sporting event. So as simple as that, when it is going to be your FIFA Under 17 Women's World Cup, that also is a recognized event. If the tickets are going to be less than 500, any case you can enjoy your entry number 81 exemption itself. However, even if the ticket is going to be more than 500, it would be leviable to it will be liable to GST. That gets exempted over here. So this is your difference between your entry. Why or what is the purpose behind this entry is this. As simple as that, if you have a 400 rupee IPL ticket, just for your information, 400 rupee, you don't have an IPL ticket. 400 rupee IPL ticket, then 400 rupee IPL ticket is exempted. Rest all tickets are all taxable. Now, if I say all those admission to services by way of right to admission to IPL is exempted, if I say, then the complete IPL tickets are exempted. It could be your pavilion seat or the special seat or the air conditioned showroom seat, X, Y, Z. You can think of whatever you want. All are taxable. I'll make it simple. IPL is one game completely thoroughly taxable if in case the ticket rate is going to be less than 500. Then it is exempted. So this sums up your first list discussion of 82 entries that are there, part of your CGST exemption notification and SGST exemption notification. Something need to be noted here is, till now, whatever services we have discussed that are both exempted under your intrastate supply as well as interstate supply. Both supplies it are going to get exempted, inter, as well as it is exempted. Now, what we are going to discuss here is a list of six more services we are going to discuss, which are exempted only on interstate supply. Or to put it in a different way, these exemptions are only available in IGST notification, because never there will be an intrastate supply. Import of service never will be an intrastate supply. Always it will only be what? Interstate supply. And if I need to exempt some import of services, then that import of services will be only part of my IGST notification 9 bar 2017 of integrated tax. So these are the points that need to be noted with reference towards your IGST exemption. Some of you might think, sir, you told 116 services are there, but we closed with a number 82. Come on, kindly understand. Many exemption entries had 10A, 10B, 10C, 10D. Similarly, there we had 9A, 9B. Now we had just a minute before 81, 82, 82A, all this and all. So if you add all those A, B, C, D individual entry wise, it will come up to 116 plus six more services we have only on IGST to start with. All those services provided by a distinct person or any transaction that happened between distinct person is exempted. But here it is a little carefully worded. I can't generalize the word transactions between distinct persons are exempted. No. Supply of services by a person in India to its own establishment outside India, being a distinct person, then it is exempted. See, supplier of service in India, recipient of service outside India, place of supply outside India, money will come in forex. Sir, export of service. No, here is the catch. Supplier and recipient should not be distinct person. It is the condition. Unfortunately, supplier is X Technologies Private Limited in India. Recipient is X Technologies Private Limited, Dubai Permanent Establishment. Meaning thereby the same company's foreign branch. If you want a live example, Ramco Systems India Limited in Tamil Nadu has a foreign branch called as Ramco Systems India Limited, Dubai. All those services provided by Ramco Systems India Limited, Tamil Nadu to Ramco Systems India Limited, Dubai cannot be treated as export of service. Why, sir? Very simple. Both of them are nothing but what? Holding company, subsidiary company. No, both of them belong to a same company, enjoy a same PAN number. It is as good as a foreign branch. It is as simple as that. In India, if you have a Google India Private Limited, then you can say it is a subsidiary of a parent company called as Google Inc. In India, if you have Google Inc. itself, then you will call it as what? Google Inc. USA. Same company has an office here in India, Google Inc. Then it's permanent establishment, meaning thereby a branch office. Any activities between two distinct persons, it is not an export of service. It would be treated as a exempted supply, or it is exempted from levy of GST. Because it is exempted, kindly make a note. Section 17(2) will operate. It cannot be treated as a zero rated supply as per section 2 subsection 6 read along with section 16 of IGST Act. The moment you read this exemption entry, 2 subsection 6 export of service should be remembered. Section 16 zero rated supply of IGST Act should be remembered. Conjoint reading as section 17(2) of CGST Act, which talks about a person is engaging in both taxable supply and exempted supply. Taxable supply including zero rated supply and exempted supply. So any services provided by a person in India to its own establishment outside India will not be treated as an export of service. Rather, it would be treated as an exempted supply. ITC is not eligible, refund is not eligible, refund will be denied. where it is exempted, 10F of IGST notification exempts them. Similarly, import of service by United Nations or UN organs. Similarly, import of service by your foreign diplomatic mission or embassy or consulate or all those agents are going to be exempted from levy of GST. So I'm sure you all will know import of service as per section 5, subsection 3, note read along with notification 10 of 2017, integrated tax. The recipient in India is liable to pay tax under reverse charge. No doubt. Whatever our understanding, all are right. A very careful point to be noted down here is that the supplier will be located outside India, recipient will be in India. When the recipient is going to be United Nations, when the recipient is going to be United Nations organization, when the recipient is going to be International Monetary Fund, when the recipient is going to be an embassy, when the recipient is going to be a consulate, when the recipient is going to be all those organs of United Nations, then on import of service, they are exempted from payment of GST. Followed by a new entry which is introduced during this year, 2019, is your intermediary services. I'm sure all of us can understand about intermediary services. When we discuss the place of supply, section 13, subsection 8 of IGST Act, at that time itself we discussed about intermediary services. Intermediary services means, or intermediary means, that fellow will not be engaged in main supply of service. He will just connect the two people. He just act as an intermediary. Goods need to be sold is located in Germany, or the supplier is in Germany, the recipient of the goods is in China. Here, this fellow just connects the supplier and recipient and takes a commission for it. However, has an office in India. If you go back and read place of supply will be coming out and highlighting us to us that the place where this fellow is located and he will be leviable to GST, all that stuff. Now, point here is those services are going to be exempted. Kindly make a note here. Services provided by an intermediary where location of both, important word, both supplier and recipient of goods outside the taxable territory. Sir, somewhere we read this word like this, sir. Correct. That we have discussed about drop shipment in Schedule 3. That is for goods. Here now we are discussing it from a service perspective. Both purposes are different. Now, a point that I want you to highlight here is, go back to that entry, Schedule 3, where the goods originate from a place outside taxable territory and destinate to a place outside taxable territory, but the transaction is not mediated. The transaction is executed by a company in India. Indian company places a purchase order to a person located outside India, and once supplying the purchase order and ask him to deliver to goods to the recipient, their recipient, who is located outside India. And from the recipient, they took a sales order. So there it is something to do with goods. Here, almost like that. But the difference here is, the both fellows know, the German fellow and the Japan fellow know, the goods are being supplied from Germany to Japan or China. The Germany fellow knows. Then what Indian company does, sir? Indian company promote the goods of German fellow in Germany, in Japan and China For that, the German company pays some commission to this intermediary here. The said activity would be exempted from levy of GST. He has to maintain certain necessary documents such as bill of lading, all those invoices, movement of records, plus one declaration that he just acted as an intermediary or some contractual notes. Followed by entry number 42 of IGST notification 9 of 17 exempts import of service by RBI in relation to management of foreign exchange. Again, a small point I want you to highlight. Kindly make a note. Compare this RBI entry with UN or your embassy consulates. Their embassy consulates or UN, import of service word is used. Here in RBI, for the purpose of management of foreign exchange. So, if you could able to appreciate it, one wideness you will come across in UN and embassy consulate. In UN and embassy consulate, any services, let me repeat, any services would get exempted from levy of GST, import of service. Whereas here, RBI, only one service, which will be management of Forex alone is exempted. Tomorrow, some software is imported by RBI. Yes, RBI is liable to pay GST on those software. So this is the small difference between your earlier entry and this entry, followed by a last entry on the IGST notification. All those services provided by a tour operator to a foreign tourist and the whole tour conducted outside India in case if services are provided by a tour operator. The tour operator is in India and he provides some services to a foreign tourist and the tour completely been conducted outside India. A very simple example could be a foreigner comes to a tour operator and requests him to take to Sri Lanka. The tour operator in Tamil Nadu takes the foreigner to Sri Lanka for a complete trip. Then whatever services provided by the tour operator is going to be exempted from levy of GST. Followed by a tour operator sells the holidays, sells the tour packages through online. A person from Europe books the tour for a place he sells throughout India, in India and outside India holidays. A foreign tourist books a package which is going to be a tour in, let's say, Nepal, Bhutan, on all those places. Then yes, it is going to be exempted from levy of GST. This is the easiest way of looking at this entry. A little advanced way of looking at this entry is, or a better technical understanding of this entry is, there is a tour operator in India. For example, we'll take Murugan Tours and Travels. Murugan Tours and Travels usually used to conduct various foreign trips. One of their flagship foreign trip is 5 nights, 6 days in Malaysia and Singapore. 40,000 rupees they collect from each person, including the air ticket. 40,000 rupees is collected from each person, a twin sharing basis, stay 5 nights, 3 nights at Malaysia, 2 nights at Singapore. Some planning itinerary is there. Don't be much bothered about that content and all. 40,000 rupees from each person. About 50 people have joined. All the 50 people are in Chennai or in and around Tamil Nadu. The Murugan Travels and Tourists is also in Tamil Nadu. And this Murugan Travels and Tourists collect from all 50 people, group tour, all 50 people, 40,000 rupees. A question before us here to be carefully noted. Kindly make a note here. Supplier of the tour package is also in India. Recipient of the tour package service also in India. When supplier and recipient are in India, then section 12 will be applicable. Place of supply will be location of recipient, and you will close this discussion. Now here and all, no, absolutely challenge. From a little important, from a CMA perspective, remember, tour packages or conduct tour is liable for 5% GST. CMA final have to remember that rate of tax. So for you, 5% will be the rate of tax. Having said all that, parking that discussion. Getting into your how it actually works. 5 days, 5 nights, 6 days trip where day one the passengers will be boarded in the aircraft where people from Murugan Travels and Tour will go and ensure they get into the aircraft. They are all getting. At Singapore, Murugan Travels and Tourists signed a back-to-back contract arrangement with a company called as SOTC PTE Limited, a company in Singapore. SOTC PTE Limited gives a package, says each person pay me 18,500 rupees. I will take care of them for 5 nights there in Singapore and Malaysia. So this fellow signs back-to-back arrangement. SOTC PTE Limited is responsible from the moment passenger comes to Singapore, he will take them to Singapore 2 days, then Malaysia 3 days, then bring them back to Singapore and ensure they travel from Singapore to Chennai or whatever locations as per. But the crux here is for that entire 5 days trip, a back-to-back arrangement is done with a SOTC company. To put it in a very simple way, services supplied by SOTC PTE Limited, company in non-taxable territory, to a company in India, Murugan Travels, Tours and Travels Private Limited, then is it import of service or not? Yes, all of you will agree. What? Import of service. Who's liable to pay tax? Recipient in India is liable to pay tax. Correct. Recipient in India liable to pay tax. Before that, check here. Services provided by a tour operator. Correct. SOTC, tour operator. Yes. To a foreign tourist. He is providing service to whom? Foreign tourist or Indian? Sir, Indian, sir. A Indian in Singapore is a foreign tourist. Good. Services provided by a tour operator, SOTC, to a foreign tourist, which is what? The Indian who went there becomes foreign tourist, and the whole tour conducted what? Outside India. Then indirectly import of service by a tour operator is getting exempted. See, this is a technical understanding. Let me repeat. High technical understanding. If you could able to really understand this example, I am happy for you. Absolutely nothing beyond that. But in case you find it is little challenging to you, come on, understand. You have to have a little more understanding of this business. Maybe it will be more comfortable to you. That's what I can share. But nothing great about it. A very simple example of this could be taking a foreigner to another country and bringing back him here. Yes, exempted. I am not denying. That is not the real intention of this example. The real intention of this example is something different. So these are the extra 6 entries which make the services to or make the toll to 124 services which are going to be exempted from your IGST exemption. Those whole 116 plus extra 6 or 8 services which makes the toll to 124 services. Those whole services are exempted from levy of GST. Don't break your head on entry numbers. See, many times we refer and share the views relating to entry numbers. We are not here to remember entry numbers and all. Start remembering the content. Many places, contents, words are important. Words such as educational institution, agriculturist, agricultural produce, agricultural extension services, educational institution, healthcare services, or it is going to be clinical establishment, authorized medical practitioner. Words like this are all gaining its momentum. Charitable institution, municipality, panchayat, activities entrusted to municipality, activities entrusted to panchayat, entity registered under 12AA means what? So take control on those words, because those words are the real words relating to understanding the exemption. My humble view is very simple. The moment you see a problem, and you should and if you are able to very comfortably close, let me repeat, very comfortably close, this is a supply, and this supply is leviable to GST under forward charge or reverse charge. And if you could able to say this is exempted by the exempted notification, I think you are successful in your learning of exempted services. The moment you say transportation of milk by a GTA to a society, yes, the society is liable to pay tax under reverse charge. Levy is under section 9(3) reverse charge. Society is liable. However, that activity is exempted from levy of GST in case of transportation of milk. However, if it is transportation of curd or ghee, it would be leviable to GST. I think you understood this concept. No, 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 sir. If you want to be more authoritative, okay, entry number 21 of notification 12 of 2017 of central tax, the said activity would be exempted. See, that comes up over a period of time, or after reading it 2 3 times, then obviously you will know. After 3 times 4 times, you'll by default you will remember those numbers. That was some of those very important numbers. Entry 54 will talk about agriculture. Entry 74 will talk about your what is it? 74 would talk about your healthcare services. You by default you will remember. So my only request is concentrate on the content. Content of the exempted services are a lot more important. Somehow it is chronologically structured. Let me repeat it. Very beautifully chronologically structured, where initially it will talk about some government services, then something to do with construction, then something to do with your renting related services, immovable property related services. Then it would discuss about transportation of passengers, transportation of goods, and all those services provided by government bodies. And then again, a set of exempted services discussion about government services comes into the picture, and those certain other general services, and then comes up discussion relating to all the other services. It comes in certain chronological order. I would recommend you to read through in the same chronological order. A small topic was pending for us for our discussions. Somehow it has not been, or I would not be able to fit that topic anywhere associated it. So I thought I would fit it over here. A very simple topic called as a liability to pay taxes. What do you mean by this topic called as liability to pay taxes? A very simple topic. See, the intention of this topic is no doubt, yes, there would be a possibility of recovery actions will be there, and taxes will be recovered by the government. So we already discussed about the recovery proceedings, how the government have, whether the government have power to recover all that and all. Now here our whole agenda is to discuss about the liability to pay taxes. Now, generally, who is liable to pay taxes? If there is some unpaid tax demand, in case there is some penalty, interest that are all not paid, who will be liable for it? That is the question that we always have. And we have a set of few sections, somewhere starts from section number 85, end with section number 94, discuss about various provisions relating to liability to pay taxes. I just want you to be aware about it, because any case, these are all liable. It's as simple as maybe if I ask this question, sometime you'll find it very easy also. In case of there is a transfer of a business on a going concern basis, maybe out of lease purposes, or as a slum sale, or as part of amalgamation, or as part of mergers, or as part of various other activities. In all these cases, yes, who is liable to pay tax for the period prior to transfer? Now, for the period after transfer, no doubt, the amalgamated company, the transferee, the recipient, that person is liable. Prior to transfer, who is liable? Both are liable, jointly and severally liable. In fact, there are many agreements who will specifically say for a period prior to the transfer, in case there is any liability, yes, the transferee will pay on behalf of the transferor, or as transferee is today, he is the fellow who is running the business, he is liable. But the transferor will indemnify the transferee. To that extent, we have agreements or which are being done generally as part of due diligence, which are done for mergers and acquisition, will reveal all this points associated with it. But for our understanding, both are jointly and severally liable. In case there is any tax liability pending from an agent, then that agent is liable to agent dealt with goods. He supplied the goods, but he has not complied with return. He has not paid the taxes that he has collected from his consumer. Then who is liable? Very simple. Both agent and principal is jointly and severally liable in relating to all those transactions that are executed by the agent. In case of liquidation of a company, if a company is going to get liquidated and that company has some tax dues and there is an official liquidator being appointed under the Companies Act, IBC, XYZ, we have all this uh, possibilities that are all there. In case of liquidation, the official liquidator will send a request to the respective commissioner of jurisdiction, and the commissioner will send in reply within 3 months. What is the tax, interest, penalty that are all due? That will be settled by the liquidator. Once that is being settled, only yes, the balance money will be given to all the other people, which we are all aware. That is what is the process. In case of private limited company or public limited company, they wound out the company and there is nothing or the part amount is paid, still there is an amount payable by the company. Then the directors, who are all directors at the time of default, are all joint and severally liable. Every person who is the director of the company, private limited company, is joint and severally liable. However, the same is not the position applicable when it comes to a public limited company. When it comes to a public limited company, they are not joint and severally liable. The directors are liable in case any penalty is initiated on that director. So beyond that, not like a public company, sorry, not like a private company. In case of a public company, if case of public company, it is liquidated and there are a tax payable, then it cannot be recovered from the directors. Very clear. So that is one big difference between a director of a public company and a director of a private company. In case of a partnership firm, very simple. Who were all partners until that day or the date of default, those partners are joint and severally liable. In case sometimes what happens is partner would have been retired from the firm. However, they would have not updated the records in the GST. In those circumstances, the partner has to prove at the time of the fraud, at the time of this tax demand, he is not a partner, he is retired from the partnership. So maybe after proving it, he may not be liable. On a general note, all the partners of the firm as on that date are joint and severally liable in case of any liability. In case of any estates or any business is run by a guardian or a trustee or a ward who has been appointed by the court in case of a minor, then in case any tax is payable out of it, the respective person is personally liable relating to those activities. So end of the day, if you carefully note relating to all these activities, in case of AOP, in case of HUF, the concerned person, in case of a trust, the main trustees are all jointly and severally liable in case of all these liabilities. See, the point to be discussed here is in case if the tax, interest, penalty cannot be recovered from that organization, then only they will step into this people's personal accounts. Immediately they will not step into it when it cannot be recovered. In case father running a business and father has failed to pay a tax, interest, penalty, failed to file return, and he has passed away, then obviously the legal heirs are liable for the taxes, interest, and penalty, preferably as long as the estates are available. To the extent money available and the estates available, then their legal heirs are definitely liable for all these. So these are all some points where it is told we have section 85 to 94 comes out and discuss relating to all these matters. This sums up our discussion relating to liability to payment of tax and exempted services, a second part of discussion. So if you could able to understand all these discussions as part of it, yes, give up a thumbs up, which will be more appreciated by us. Followed by, in case you have any doubts, yes, you can write to us, or you can also put it on the comments channels. If you find it is good, we would recommend you to share to your friends, so that during this lockdown period they can equip themselves with a little bit of understanding. I do understand you can't become a master by learning to listening to all these videos, but your initial understanding on the topic will get open up. We'll see you on a next video on another topic. Until then, bye bye. Good day.